The day my family cut me off didn't start with a fight. It didn't even start with a warning. It started with a text message, the kind that glows on your phone in the middle of an ordinary evening when you're folding laundry and thinking about nothing at all. I remember the hum of the washing machine, the faint scent of fabric softener, the way the city lights flickered through my window. I remember thinking about what to make for dinner, whether I'd have time to finish my book before bed, and then my phone buzzed. It was my mother. The message was short, almost clinical. "We think it's best if you don't come around anymore. Please don't contact us. We need space." No explanation, no context, just a digital wall built in a single sentence. I stared at the screen, waiting for the punchline, the follow-up, the "just kidding." But nothing came. A minute later, my brother reacted with a thumbs up, as if he were liking a meme, not erasing a sibling. I waited for my father to chime in, but he didn't. Silence, except for the steady rhythm of the dryer. I wish I could say I was shocked. I wish I could say I cried, or screamed, or felt something sharp and immediate. But the truth is, I felt nothing at all. Just a strange, hollow quiet, like the moment after a storm when the world is still deciding what comes next. I put my phone down, finished folding my shirt, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to keep the peace, smoothing over arguments, paying bills that weren't mine, answering late-night calls that always started with, "Can you help me? Just this once?" I thought about the time my father lost his job, and I picked up a second shift at the cafe, just to make sure the lights stayed on. I thought about the time my mother forgot my birthday, but remembered to ask for a loan. I thought about my brother, who only called when he needed a ride, or a favor, or a place to crash. I thought about all the times I'd told myself, "This is what family does. This is what love looks like." And I realized, sitting there in the half-light, that I'd been wrong. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just wrote, "Understood. I'll stop the payments tomorrow." I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like the absence of pain, the way you don't notice a headache is gone until you try to remember when it started. By midnight, the family group chat was a battlefield. My mother sent a string of messages, each one more frantic than the last. "You can't just walk away from us. We're your family. What are we supposed to do now?" My brother chimed in, accusing me of being selfish, of abandoning them when they needed me most. My father finally appeared, his words cold and clipped. "If you're going to act like a stranger, then be one." I didn't reply. I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window, watching the city breathe. I wish I could say I slept that night, but I didn't. I lay awake, listening to the quiet, feeling it settle around me like a new kind of blanket. I thought about all the things I'd given up for my family. Time, money, energy, pieces of myself I'd never get back. I thought about the way love can turn into obligation, how loyalty can become a leash. I thought about the stories we tell ourselves about family, the ones that say blood is thicker than water, that forgiveness is endless, that love means never giving up. I thought about how those stories had kept me trapped, and how, for the first time, I was starting to see a way out.
I wish I could say I slept that night, but I didn't. I lay awake, listening to the quiet, feeling it settle around me like a new kind of blanket. I thought about all the things I'd given up for my family. Time, money, energy, pieces of myself I'd never get back. I thought about the way love can turn into obligation, how loyalty can become a leash. I thought about the stories we tell ourselves about family, the ones that say blood is thicker than water, that forgiveness is endless, that love means never giving up. I thought about how those stories had kept me trapped, and how for the first time I was starting to see a way out. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls and twice as many texts. My mother's messages had shifted from anger to guilt, from "How could you do this to us?" to "We just want what's best for you." My brother sent a voice note, his tone somewhere between pleading and threatening. My father, true to form, said nothing at all. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and read every message. Then I deleted them, one by one, until my inbox was empty. I opened my laptop and started canceling the automatic payments. Electricity, water, internet, the streaming service my brother used to watch his favorite shows. Each click felt like closing a door, like reclaiming a room in a house I'd been forced to share for too long. I made a list of everything I'd been paying for, every bill that had my name on it but wasn't really mine. The list was longer than I expected. I wondered how I'd let it get this far, how I'd convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that being needed was the same as being loved. By noon, my phone was buzzing again. This time, it was my aunt, my cousin, even a family friend I hadn't spoken to in years. The story was spreading, twisted and retold, each version making me out to be the villain. How could you do this to your own family? Don't you care about them at all? You're going to regret this. I didn't answer. I made another cup of coffee, opened the window, and let the cold air fill the room.
I thought about calling my therapist, about asking her if I was making a mistake. But I already knew what she'd say. She'd remind me that boundaries aren't walls, that self-care isn't selfish, that sometimes the only way to heal is to let go. She'd tell me that it's okay to choose myself, even if it means disappointing people who never learned how to love me without conditions. That afternoon, I went for a walk. The city felt different, sharper, more alive. I noticed things I'd never seen before. The way the sunlight hit the pavement, the sound of birds in the trees, the laughter of strangers passing by. I realized how much of my life I'd spent looking down, checking my phone, waiting for the next crisis. I realized how much I'd missed, how much I still wanted to see. When I got home, there was a letter waiting for me. No return address, just my name in my mother's handwriting. I opened it, half expecting an apology, a plea, a promise to change. Instead, it was a list of expenses, a tally of everything I'd ever given them, as if love could be measured in dollars and cents. At the bottom, a single line, "We hope you'll reconsider." I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and sat down at my desk. I opened a blank document and started to write. Not to them, but to myself. I wrote about the day my family cut me off, about the way it felt to finally be free. I wrote about the pain and the relief, the fear and the hope. I wrote about the person I wanted to become, the life I wanted to build. And as I wrote, I realized that this was just the beginning. The days that followed felt like walking through a house after the furniture's been moved out. Everything was familiar, but nothing was comfortable. I kept expecting the phone to ring, for someone to show up at my door, for the old patterns to snap back into place. But the silence held. It was a new kind of quiet. Not the tense hush of waiting for the next demand, but the gentle hush of possibility. I found myself listening to the sounds of my own life, the kettle whistling, the neighbor's dog barking, the creak of the floorboards under my feet. I realized how long it had been since I'd heard anything but the noise of other people's needs. I started to notice the small things I'd neglected, the stack of unread books on my nightstand, the half-finished painting leaning against the wall, the recipe I'd bookmarked months ago but never tried. I made a list of things I wanted to do, not because anyone expected it, but because I wanted to. I cooked myself dinner, just for the pleasure of it, and ate at the table with a candle burning, no phone in sight. I painted for hours, losing track of time, letting the colors bleed and blend without worrying about the outcome.
I read until my eyes grew heavy, then fell asleep with the book still open in my lap. But freedom, I learned, isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around you, the ground uncertain beneath your feet. There were moments when the loneliness pressed in, when I missed the chaos and the noise, even the arguments. There were nights when I reached for my phone, half hoping for a message, a sign that someone cared enough to break the silence. But each time I reminded myself why I'd made this choice. I reminded myself that peace isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of self-respect.
After we hung up, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to earn love, all the ways I'd made myself small to fit into someone else's story. I thought about the years I'd spent apologizing for things that weren't my fault, carrying burdens that weren't mine to bear. I thought about the version of myself I'd left behind, the one who believed that love was something you had to buy or beg for or prove. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. The air was crisp, the streets quiet. I ran past the park where my father used to take me as a child, past the bakery where my mother bought birthday cakes, past the apartment where my brother lived before he moved back home. Each place held a memory, a piece of the story I was trying to rewrite. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs ached, until the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own breath. When I finally stopped, I felt lighter, as if I'd left something behind on the pavement. That afternoon, I got an email from my boss. She wanted to know if I was interested in taking on a new project, something challenging, something that would mean more responsibility and more recognition. For a moment, I hesitated. I thought about all the times I'd turned down opportunities because I was afraid of being needed elsewhere, of letting someone down. But this time I said yes. I said yes to myself, to my own ambitions, to the possibility of a life that was mine alone. The project was demanding, but it was also exhilarating. I threw myself into the work, staying late at the office, brainstorming ideas, collaborating with colleagues who saw me as more than just a helper, but as a leader. For the first time, I felt seen, not for what I could give, but for who I was. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was enough. Of course, the past didn't disappear. My family's absence was a shadow that followed me, sometimes long and dark, sometimes barely noticeable. There were days when the guilt crept in, whispering that I was selfish, ungrateful, heartless. There were nights when I replayed old conversations, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have saved us from falling apart. But each time I reminded myself that love without respect isn't love at all. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away.
A week after the text, I got a letter from my father. It was short, almost businesslike. "We're disappointed in you. We hope you'll come to your senses. Family is everything." I read it twice, searching for the words that weren't there. No apology, no understanding, just a demand for loyalty. I folded the letter and put it with the others, a stack of paper reminders that I was no longer responsible for their happiness. I started to reach out to friends I'd lost touch with, people I'd neglected in my quest to keep my family afloat. We met for coffee, for dinner, for long walks in the park. I told them the truth, not the sanitized version, but the messy, complicated reality. Some of them understood, some didn't, but each conversation was a step toward reclaiming my own story, my own voice. One night, I sat with my best friend on her rooftop, the city spread out below us like a map of possibilities. She listened as I poured out everything, the anger, the relief, the fear, the hope. When I finished, she squeezed my hand and said, "You deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can do for other people." Her words settled in my chest, warm and solid, a new kind of foundation. As the days turned into weeks, I started to build a life that felt like mine. I filled my apartment with plants, with art, with music. I learned to cook new recipes, to dance in my living room, to laugh at my own jokes. I made mistakes, and I forgave myself. I learned that freedom isn't about being alone, but about choosing who gets to be close. I learned that love, real love, doesn't come with strings attached. Spring arrived quietly, almost as if it was sneaking in through the cracks of my new life. I noticed it in the way the sunlight lingered a little longer on my windowsill, in the sudden burst of green on the trees outside my building, in the laughter of children echoing from the park below. I found myself waking up before my alarm, drawn to the promise of a day that belonged entirely to me. There was a lightness in my step, a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the world was opening up, inviting me to step forward, to claim something I'd always believed was out of reach. But healing isn't a straight line. Some days the old ache returned, sharp and unexpected. I'd see a family gathered at a cafe, sharing stories over coffee, and feel a pang of longing. I'd hear a song my mother used to hum while cleaning the house, and the memories would flood back, bittersweet and heavy. There were moments when I missed them. Not the demands, not the guilt, but the idea of family, the hope that things could have been different. I let myself feel it all, the grief and the gratitude, the sorrow and the relief. I learned that missing someone doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It just means you're human.